Yasmin, are you there? Can you talk to us?
Can you hear us?
We can hear
Testing,
you.
testing, testing.
You got a big boat on your picture.
Yeah, my computer's all wacky. For some reason, the camera microphone got confused with the standalone mic, and anyway, we sorted it out now.
What state are you in? What area, what state are you in?
Oh, California.
That's what I thought. Okay.
Yeah, Northern California. And we had a little boating adventure.
Well, tell us about it.
Yeah. So
Go ahead.
with everything that we've been through over the past year, we had planned this houseboating adventure. We were going to go up to Lake Shasta and rent a houseboat and just relax on the water for a week. And I had a spot picked out where I could do some rock hounding, where there was an old, there used to be an old copper and silver mine. And so apparently they had a bunch of turquoise that they just cast aside, and it slowly made its way down into this creek. So I was looking forward to rock hounding there, and apparently it's only accessible by boat. And then we were going to, after that, we were planning to go to the caverns up there, also only accessible by boat. And then there was another site which Bob wanted to go see. However, day one, we didn't quite make it. We got to the inlet for the Little Backbone Creek area, which is where the turquoise was. And we broke down there. I'll let Bob chime in and explain some of the more.
So basically, what happened was we motored across the lake for about 2 hours and 15 minutes or so, and these boats only go like 3-4 miles an hour, and they're usually in some sort of dilapidated condition because that's what you expect from a rental agency. You don't really expect top notch. You just kind of expect running, which was okay with me. So I was like, I'll be on a lake. Should be okay, right? No problem. They wouldn't give me a boat that would break down. And so I got to the inlet on the other side, and I kind of looked at it. I looked at the wind. I looked at the inlet. I looked at where she wanted to go, and I decided that I wanted to go about 3/4 of the way in and beach up. And then tomorrow morning, the next day, we would go the rest of the way in. She'd go get her turquoise, and I'd barbecue, and that would be that. Well, so I get in there, and I get in about halfway, and I'm cruising like at barely walking speed. So for all you sailors out there, we call that at idle. So I was at idle, and I was just kind of moving forward and into the wind, kind of thinking everything's kind of cool. And I heard this kind of thunk thing, but my boat didn't lift, stop, slow, change direction, scrape, or make any noises that would indicate that I had hit some sort of underwater obstruction, which is always quite possible. And I thought, oh shit, I really did something now. But I was like, that's going to be okay. It's going to be fine. And so I put the boat in reverse, and it didn't do anything. I put the boat in forward, and it didn't do anything. And I said, man, that was my prop. They had just, and the guy had just said when I picked up the boat, he goes, we worked on the engine recently. We had to do some work on the tranny. And so I went, I just lost my prop, right? I lost my propulsion anyway, so it really doesn't matter what I lost. I cannot move this boat forward and backward under my control. So then I went, well, I'm in a houseboat, and it's windy. And that means I'm a sail. So I knew we were going to be okay because we were in the inlet, and the wind was blowing us into the inlet, but it wasn't like the wind had any force or anything. It was going to beach us with any real strength and keep us somewhere. We were just going to bounce along until it figured we got close enough to where we could put one of our stakes in the ground and tie the darn thing off. And so that's what we did. We bounced down the shoreline. And we called people, and no one answered. And, of course, the office was closed. And I said, I'm a sailor, so I'm not really worried. It started to rain. I thought I wasn't really worried, because we were bouncing down the inlet. But what I did say to myself is no matter what I do, I don't have a worthy craft. And so I assumed, because we were on Lake Shasta, that if I didn't have a worthy craft, I could call the sheriff's department and their aquatic unit could be dispatched to make sure I didn't drift away somewhere. I mean, it's not like I expected a repair or somebody to come get me or bring me some food. You know, I mean, I was in serious trouble. And so we called people and we couldn't get through. And we finally got through on 911 and we explained it to 911 that we're drifting along on the lake. And they're like, it's okay. I'm like, what do you mean it's okay? And they're like, no, it's okay. We called the marina and they said, you're fine. They'll come out and get you in the morning. And I'm like, I'm drifting on Lake Shasta in the rain and in the wind with no way to stop my boat. Who says this is okay? And I realized at that point that 911 couldn't understand the maritime instructions that just because I was bouncing up and down the side didn't mean I was safe. It just meant for that moment I was bouncing up and down the side. And so that's what we continued to do. And we finally stopped. We got some lines out and I said, we might be all right. You know, this is going to be okay. We're level. This is not so bad. And so this was like, we had dinner, you know, and we're going, okay, this is our vacation, right? Our vacation is...
We thought we were tied off, but...
Well, we weren't really tied off. We're not tied off in a sailor's version of tied off. We were tied to the shore kind of barely with these stakes that they gave us because that's the best that we could accommodate because we couldn't nose up as they suggested. We were parallel to the beach, and so the wind changed direction. Yeah. Right. See, this is when it became really weird is around 11 o'clock that night, the wind changed direction. It's totally dark. And now our boat is going out back into the lake. And so now I'm like, hey, what's in the lake?
A big old freaking dam.
And some towers and some booms and some suction pieces and equipment that protrudes from the dam. And, you know, all I got to do is bounce up against that in a bad position. We roll over and die. So now I'm contemplating all this, and I look at Yasmin, and I'm like, sorry. I look at Yasmin, and I go, okay, I'm really sorry, but I honestly don't know what's going to happen. And we may have to abandon this boat in the rain and get to shore if we're not close enough to avoid riding it out into the middle of a lake with no hope of doing anything else than sinking with it or bouncing off of something new. I said, we know where the land is and we know where the shore is. We go there if we have to. And for about another 40 minutes, we were just headed into the lake and I was opening and closing windows as if the boat was a giant sail and doing everything I could because I had nothing, not a pole, nothing, not an anchor, not a radio, not a light. I didn't have a working motor. My batteries were draining. You know, I had all these things were going against me and the wind changed one more time. And it blew us way back into the inlet and up to this big freaking rock, this huge Charlton Heston straight out of the movie, you're not breaking me with a stick rock, and I got a line around it. And I went, this is good. This is good. And Yasmin went, what do you think? And I went to sleep.
And of course I was up all night, but
Right. I just went to sleep. I was like, we're good.
But what he didn't know was when we had tied off the first time, he had walked up on shore to try and get a cell phone signal. Now we could call 911, but we couldn't call any phone numbers. So, you know, 911 wasn't really understanding our situation, and so they weren't doing much. So we couldn't call anyone else. And even though the marina was closed, we wouldn't have been able to call them in the morning anyway because there was no signal. So I just put in a call to my mom and his brother, who's passed on, to help us. And so I think maybe that's why we broke loose, because when we tied up to the rock, that was a better area to get some phone calls in the morning.
Yeah, so when the morning comes along and I'm thinking, okay, I got to crawl out of this place or I got to do something because I don't know anybody that's going to come and get me. I have no communication. I have no way of knowing what's going on. So I'm looking around and it's getting light and I tell Yasmin, yeah, I'm going to climb up. Okay, silly me. You're on the edge of a reservoir. It's all covered in manzanita and pine and the rest of it. There's no trail. It's all you can do is walk along the shore, which is this muddy, rocky, crummy stuff where you go 100 feet in about 10 minutes. And I realized, okay, that's out of the question. And so I sat down on a rock and I got a bar. And I was like, cool. And so I called 911 again because I didn't want to lose my position. And they said, maybe somebody's coming out to get you. And I went, this really bites. So then I called my buddy at work, my boss, and I said, can you hear me? And he's like, yeah. And I told him everything. And he in Sacramento was the one calling the Shasta sheriffs and all the rest of it, and the sheriffs, the worst part about this whole thing was 911 didn't pass the call to the sheriff's department or the rescue boat. They didn't pass it. And it's a complete failure that the U.S. Forest Service is already looking into, and God bless them for it. But even if they had passed it, the rescue captain, who I talked to on the phone the very next day, after another story we'll tell you, but I talked to him on the phone, and he apologized and said he'd be looking into this immediately because there's no excuse for a mariner to be stuck on the water floating in Shasta Lake. There's none. And I said, I agree. And I said, he goes, what do you want to do? Do you want to sue him? And I go, no, I want to correct it because this is wrong. We got to make sure this doesn't happen to people. There has to be a method in place. I said, you're on a lake. Redding is right here. There's no excuse to be not able to get a boat out here if somebody's really, 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 really in trouble. And I was really, really in trouble for like 2.5 hours out of that 14. The rest of the time, I really wasn't worried about it. So I want to correct that. But we get the boat back after towing, and I figure, we nearly floated around and died out there. Somebody's going to meet me at the dock, right? And somebody's going to tell me everything going to be okay, and they're going to offer me something, and I'm going to say no, thank you, but we can work something out, and I'll go home. No, I get to the boat dock, and nobody meets me. And so I go cruising down the dock, and I get into their little office and open the door, and I say, hey.
Well, before that, as we were getting towed back by the
mechanic, then there's that.
His boat breaks down in the middle of the lake.
So the boat they sent to rescue us broke down. But anyway, we get back there, and they go, can we help you? And I'm like, yeah, Mr. West. And the guy goes, okay. And so I start telling him what happened. And the manager looks at me and literally out of his mouth says, I'm going to give you your money back and you get the hell off my property. You're not the kind of person that should go houseboating. And so I really, really, really held everything back that I was thinking. And I said, really? I said, I'm gonna give you an opportunity to tell me who owns this business. And he goes, I'm not telling you anything. You need to get out of here. And I went, okay, just remember, I gave you an opportunity to tell me who owns this business. And so as I was walking out, I said, they gave me a houseboat that was almost 50 years old, that had recently been repaired. And even if it hadn't lost the prop or the batteries hadn't died, it really wouldn't matter because they had incorrectly maintained the starter on it. And we have pictures of the broken bolts. I said, I have cell phone data of me floating around on their freaking lake. I said, I have a witness statement, my wife's witness statement, and this place is run by a conditional use permit authorized by the U.S. Forestry Department. I have a right as a citizen. And I have a duty, after being on the bay for 35 years, to challenge and ask questions onto why that call was not placed correctly and the situation was not handled correctly. And is the marina truly responsible for negligent operation and maintenance of a business that endangers hundreds of lives every night out on that water, added with the forms of alcohol that are consumed on that water?
Well, they gave us our money back awfully quick.
Right, because there were 2 other boats broken on the dock.
And we didn't even ask for a refund. They just
threw it at us before we even made it in there.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, it was insane. It was absolutely insane.
So what's the next step? Lawsuit?
No, I think a lawsuit, Walt, is pointless because lawsuits indicate that you want fame, fortune, or money. And so what happens is in most
Wait a
cases-
minute, but
No, I mean-
if they had shown even an inkling of being responsible,
So let's
but they didn't even show that. They didn't show any. They didn't care about you. They didn't care about being responsible for that. So,
but this is where I encourage people to learn something about how businesses operate and where they operate. When you have no recourse because you have no money, you can't approach somebody and ask them for money because you have no way to gain assets. But in this instance, which is kind of interesting, Shasta is the second largest lake in the West and has more rental vessel traffic than Lake Tahoe, which has a Coast Guard station. So my first question to my U.S. government is, why does a lake that has more traffic than Lake Tahoe, which is in California,
And a dam,
which creates a hazard, does not have a Coast Guard station when Lake Tahoe does? The next question I ask is, since Shasta Lake feeds water to an entire industry below it, shouldn't we look at the water quality and the effects that this industry might have on our lakes, especially considering we're in a drought? The next thing I might consider if I was a mariner, which I was for 35 years, teaching vessels safety and instruction, is that after I noticed the condition of the businesses on this lake, and since my U.S. government already authorizes what's known as a conditional use permit, which means they can alter, review, or revoke that at almost any time with no recourse. There's 11 other operators on the lake, I'm sure, that want to keep their businesses and run them correctly. So what I did was, instead of being enraged and asking for money, is channel the rage into a recommendation. And I notified all the appropriate government agencies, representatives on a local level and a federal level that it was my intention to investigate how an operation like this can still exist in this century.
So we're, instead of going after their pockets, because this is an organization, they all net about
8.8 million a summer.
And that's each resort, and there's about 10 resorts. So we figure they can certainly afford to, between all of them, afford to pay for somebody to just check up on people on the lake during the night.
Yeah, so I was talking to the U.S. Forest Service ranger that's in charge of the aquatic vessel stationed on the lake for most days. And I said, because he said the same thing you did, well, you got to go after him. And I'm going, look, man, I can go after one group, or I can go after everybody and convince the other 11 to get on board with an idea to change the structure and way that you think in a positive manner so that it helps everyone involved. And they can go after one guy, or I can just fight one guy for the rest of my life. Why would I do that when the U.S. government already oversees this operation? I'm a taxpayer. But the difference here is the guy at the rental place treated me like I was some sort of rental moron. He had no idea that I'd spent 35 years teaching vessel safety on the water. He threw me out like he'd throw out any other customer. Just get rid of them. They're not going to say anything. What have I got to worry about? And for 35 years as a kid, I promised not to let stuff like this slide. So even if I'm in fault, I got to look into it and say, why isn't there a boat at night? Why aren't they doing maintenance logs? Why isn't there a vessel certification process that checks the safety gear on board the boat, like randomly?
Well, and maintenance information on what's been done to each boat should be there too.
Absolutely, 100%. There should be a log on every boat that, as a consumer, you should be able to walk onto a boat and go, I want to review the maintenance log.
Right. They
There
do
was
it for
nothing.
vehicles.
They had a little orange flag for distress. And I said, what's this for? And they go, that's our orange flag. I said, that's our swimming flag? Really? Okay, no problem. I still wasn't worried. It was a dilapidated POS. I was not worried until the motor went out. Then I got a little worried. But I had a reasonable expectation that if I called 911, there'd be a unit that could come out and push us to shore. And then I could just sit all night and wait for repair.
So they dropped their end of the rope too.
Yeah.
Oh, 911 failed completely.
Yeah, there were multiple fail points, which
Yeah.
was what's caused more of a dangerous situation.
And so by the time I get back to the place and the guy insults me and we get packed up and in the car and on the way home, I'm already trying to figure out which congressman runs this place, which unit of the U.S. Forest Service is running the boat. How do I get a FOIA request into the local DA to see who's been killed out here before?
Which there have been multiple deaths, unfortunately.
And so then talking to Yasmin, she was talking about the money because she goes, oh, there's a lot of money coming through here. And I'm like, she goes, they were really quick to refund the money. I mean, they were throwing money at 3 different people while we were standing there. It must have been worth $10,000 to them.
Whoa.
But they threw it at him like it was nothing. And so I looked at Yasmin and I go,
Something's wrong.
Something's really wrong here. I said, if I was investigating this place.
It sounds like an illegal operation.
Exactly, because if I was investigating this place, my first inkling would be to go in there and ask them about incidents, right? I mean, if you had a lawsuit for a lost arm or something, you'd go in and ask them, how many times have you had injuries? And they'd say, none. And you'd say, how many times have you had to go out and rescue somebody? And they go, well, during the day, boats break down. We got a couple of those. And you'd go, well, prove that you don't. And they'd show you all this paperwork that would have nothing. No reportables, right? And you'd go, well, shoot, there's nothing here. Well, that's not true because there's no proof there. You needed to look at how many people were refunded over a 10-year period and ask yourself, why was it they were refunding 3 to 4 people every week or every day in some cases? And is it one group or 12?
No wonder there are so many UFO abductions. I mean, look how easy it is not to care for people.
Right.
Wow.
Exactly. They were towing us in. I was looking at Yasmin and I go, I can't take this. I can't believe this happened. I will not stand for this. And I was totally calm when I walked into the guy's office. I mean, I was just Mr. Wonderful. And I was even Mr. Wonderful leaving. It was after that I started to get irate.
Yeah,
Maybe
but this is an example of you being the one person that they didn't want that to happen because you knew so much because you had the experience. When you're talking about these hypothetical situations, it's like, no, those probably aren't hypothetical. There's probably been dozens, maybe hundreds of people who have been hurt, who have been emotionally hurt or physically hurt, who then, come up against these people. And, it's not just what they did to you. It's like, how far would they take that kind of attitude?
Right.
These are not good people.
Right. This is not good people. And so if we were on the bay, my question would have been to the Coast Guard, I would have had a radio. As a kid for 40 years, I would have had a radio. So no big deal. Somebody would have gotten me. I've been fished out of the water before. No big deal, really. And this time I thought, there's got to be a boom in front of that dam. There's got to be some lights on it at night. If I had a boat hook, which I didn't, I could grab something that was floating as I went by it, and maybe I'd have a chance to tie off and hopefully not roll over and die. But at least I'd have an option. But I didn't have that. Because up there, they don't even give you an anchor because the water's too deep, too quick. So they don't think that maybe if you got to shore close enough to use an anchor with a 60-foot line, you might want to in an emergency. Which if I had had one, we wouldn't have floated the second time. We'd have been fine. But I didn't.
You should have been a little bit more concerned about everything and made sure all that stuff was on the boat. It's your fault.
It is my fault, and so clearly when I started to prepare all the documents, I prepared the incident report, the cell report, the communications reports, a letter to the Congress, letter to the district attorney, letter to the Ninth Circuit, letter to everybody. So spent the last 3 days doing documentation, probably 8 communications to everybody. And I even state in those documents that I could clearly be at fault on this because I was stupid enough to get on a rental boat that was dilapidated and probably purchased by Merle Haggard in like 1970. But I was confident in my ability that as long as my motor ran, I could overcome everything. And truly, we were even doing okay drifting until the wind changed.
Yeah, but that goes so contrary to everything that you've ever taught anybody. And
Right.
my feeling is that you were kept ignorant. Your guides wanted you to go through this experience so that you can, do something about it, one, and two, teach people.
Right.
To pay attention to the details. And so I think that, there's so many metaphysical aspects of it, even to Yasmin asking her sister and mom to come help me here. When you got that kind of energy, it's like, yeah, they'll blank you out. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've said to myself, well, that was really effing stupid.
Right.
And yet why didn't I remember? Because they were blanking me out. They wanted me to have the experience because you knew better, but 99.9% of everybody that got on the boat did not know better.
Right. So that's really the trick of it. So here we are drifting, and I'm opening and closing doorways and windows and stuff to get the air to move through the boat so it won't drift quite the same way that it was. I'm looking at the rudder, I'm looking at all these little things. I'm walking back and forth realizing I have no tools, no safety, no nothing. I have nothing. I'm just this little thing floating around on the world, and I'm going, it's really pretty out here. It's really nice. It's raining a little, it's cloudy, but it's pretty. That's a beautiful sunrise. I did not need to see the sunset, the dark, and the sunrise all in one time. I've done that.
Well, and I had even asked, when we were packing, I said, should we bring some extra line?
Yeah.
And you're like, oh no.
No, everything's gonna be fine because up there they have a system. And I agreed that the system actually made sense. You nose up to the beach, you throw the first 2 feet of your boat up on the beach, and the water goes down at night. It goes down about 6 to 8 inches every night. And so the worst that can happen to you is that more of your boat will be on land when you wake up than when you got there. And you'll use your engine to pull you off.
But that's assuming that you have an engine to put the nose up on the beach. And
she has a really good point there. So when we lost forward propulsion, I was parallel to the beach. There was nothing. I mean, at that point I went, uh-oh. And so I told her, I said, I think we lost it. And so they have a command throttle system, so we checked to make sure it was neutral. We did a walkabout. Nothing was burning. Nothing smelled. There was no water coming in. There was no use looking at the engine compartment because we didn't have any tools. So it wouldn't have mattered what we'd done. If we'd opened that, all we could have done is done worse things. Because liability was we actually ended up doing the right thing. We never touched anything. So if they were to do forensic analysis on the motor, they wouldn't find us doing anything. But so since
that's my question here. When you finally got it back to the dock, did you jump in the water to see if you even had the propeller on it?
Oh, you could see it at that point. So I lost the prop, and I was sure I lost the prop, and dumb move. But I had felt something. I felt what I thought was contact on the bottom, something bounce, and my real worry was drifting. So I wasn't really worried about the engine at that point. And so once I'd thrown it neutral, it was still running. And then I tried it in reverse again, and it wasn't going. And I tried it forward again, and it wasn't going. I banged on the thing to the right because that's the command center, and made sure it was not in neutral. Pulled it out, got it into neutral, could put it forward but not back, which indicated that I had throttle control. Put it back in, pushed it into forward, and it died. And I went, okay, I turned the key, and it started. And so I was like, okay, cool. So I had Yasmin come over, and I go, check this out. I turned it off, and I turned it on, and it started. And I put it in forward. I go, do you feel motion? She goes, no. I said, look at the back of the boat, and there was no thrust. So she goes, there's no thrust. And I went, okay, cool. And then it died. And then we tried to start it. It wouldn't start because the batteries were too low at that point. They were at 10.5 volts, so couldn't start it anyway. At that point, I disregarded the engine.
Because it hadn't been charging while we were driving. So that was another fail point.
When they put the engine back together after the transmission was put in, according to the mechanic John, who came on board the boat the following morning, he said the bolt had snapped inside the motor. It would have required a mechanic's easy outset drill, tap, and hammer to extract the broken part of the bolt before the starter could have been reinstalled anyway. Any attempts by us with tools would have been useless.
But that doesn't explain. So the starter broke off. So
correct. That was the noise we heard.
But
the starter had actually broke. It was still floating in there.
You never hit anything on the surf. I mean, underground. You never hit that.
Not absolutely not. The prop was fine. It's right where it was supposed to be.
So
it was free turning.
So there was a problem with it because it wasn't engaging.
Correct.
So
my suspicion is that when they went to remove the outdrive, because those are what they call an IO, you have an inboard engine that's static, it's level. And then on the outside of the boat, on the other side of a rubber boot, you have what is called the outdrive, and that's where the flywheel for the engine is for those of your mechanics. Big round thing on the back. Well, anyway, the starter attaches to the flywheel, and it usually attaches from the motor side into the outdrive. Why is this important? Because if you replace an outdrive on an engine, you must, 9 times out of 10, remove the starter and put it back in. And there are usually 3 bolts in most applications of a starter, and oddly enough, 2 of them are always one side and 1 of them is always different. And the reason for that is because initial torque says that when the starter is engaged on any flywheel, there'll be a moment, 1/10 second, where there will be no torque on the starter bendix, and if you don't have that extra stronger bolt, it would snap it every time. I think that's pretty close. I didn't take a physics course, so I can't tell you the exact poundage requirements, but it's usually a bigger one or 2 smaller ones. Anyway, so ours broke, and the starter was floating in there. That's what started it maybe 1-2 more times, but it does not explain the lack of forward propulsion or reverse propulsion.
So there was
sounds like the tranny wasn't working, even though they tried to fix it.
I agree 100%.
So there were several things probably
right.
broken.
And so when we were tied the first time, we were parallel to the shore with the wind at our short side, pushing us kind of onto the bank. So I just really wasn't worried about it. We got a line up 45 off the bow and maybe about 16 feet up. We're like, okay. And then we got a stake in the ground, but it was only a couple of feet and was at waterline level because we couldn't get up the shore. And so we put those and we lost our bow line. We swung on our stern, and Yasmin goes, well, I'll just go on shore. And I said, no, you won't. You will not get off this boat until we both get off this boat.
Now, why does the water reduce itself?
Well, that's the whole thing about having the dam. So the Shasta Dam is the headwaters of an entire irrigation system. It was designed during the Works Project administration under Roosevelt and supplies the northern Central Valley and Redding area with all of its irrigation water. Okay. So it goes into these giant silos, which then dump down in these giant turbines, at which point it comes out as energy and water. Well, on the inside of the dam, in most cases, Glen Cooley, Hoover, all of these, they have a floating boom. They have a bunch of lights, and they tell you don't go near there. This is based on the idea that your boat has an engine or has a way to communicate. Every dam I've ever been to, short of Don Pedro or smaller, has had a rescue unit at night. They may not have been on the water, but they were always available.
But it sounds like you said they told you that they had done maintenance work on the engine.
Correct.
Whatever they did was very poorly done because it sounds like the assembly wasn't very confirmed. Whatever the repair wasn't tested and confirmed. So it's like it was like it was done by a couple of blind men or something.
It probably was, Walt. And so here's the theory. They never worry about you because if you break down 9 times out of 10, and this is serious, so we started looking into it because we got back and I was enraged. I mean, I had to look at my wife and go, look, I'm really sorry. I'm just really sorry. I have no idea I have no idea what's going to happen to us. I mean, we might as well have been castaway. I have no idea. It was rainy, it was windy, it was dark. I didn't have a chart. I didn't have a radio. In actuality, now that I've had time to consider it, floating out in the lake would have been our best option because it improved our cell reception, which meant we could have called people and said, no, you don't understand. I really can't see, and I have no way to control my boat, and I'm headed towards a dam. And it's not that I'm going to go over the top. I'm not a little child. No, it's the equipment protruding from the dam on the inside that I'm worried about.
So did you get Jasmine to sign a legal paper that she won't divorce you?
I thought it was their second honeymoon. Whoa, what a trick.
No, she did what we were supposed to do. She got the wet bag and started putting the most important stuff in it. She got the rest of the stuff ready so that if we bounced against shore, we could throw it on there in the rain and at least, be sitting with a pile of our gear. When they said, "Where's our boat?" We go, "It went that way." And the funny part is, Walt, that you know me and Nancy's known me well enough now to know that it doesn't take much to really bother me. As a matter of fact, the more you bother me on the water, the calmer I get. But for about 2 hours, I was like, this is really bad. This is beyond what I called a reasonable expectation for my safety.
If you have been alone, you wouldn't have worried so much, but that you weren't alone. There was somebody there with you, and in your mind, okay, that I'm responsible for this person, so anything could happen. So I totally get you.
Yep, got that right. You're the captain.
So I have a question.
Sure.
The boat did not have a dinghy of some sort, like a raft or a dinghy, actual dinghy, no means of you to escape from a flooding boat?
It didn't even have a one of those life rafts.
No, it didn't even have a life ring. So the idea on Shasta Lake for the houseboats is that you have a life jacket for everybody on board, and you have stakes that you drive into the ground for tie-off points, and that you motor around, you nose yourself up on the beach, everybody gets drunk and has a good time. And this probably happens about 80% of the time that way. And then you've got breakdowns and stupidity. So that's probably the other 20%. We were probably in the 0.0001%, but that 1% is that 1 or 2 deaths a year, because it's not the alcohol-induced parties that really cause the problems. It's the inability to rescue or drowning victims or floating objects that cause problems. Houseboats floating in lakes that have large suction devices create many problems.
In the middle of the night during the rain. I mean, come on.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
You should have had runner lights or some other kind of consideration like that.
I did have running lights, but I had a finite amount of battery.
Right.
Because the battery wouldn't charge.
And I knew that there were no other vessels capable of operating at night. So I knew that to run my lights was actually, until I hit the open water, it was pointless. So I did run my anchor light, and we packed water type bags, we packed water resistant bags, we packed camera gear, telescopes, all sorts of stuff, but we packed in case, and I mean seriously, with 2 first aid kits, not 1, 4 flashlights, not 2, 2 sets of spare batteries, not 1. I mean,
What good is that going to do you if you're underwater drowning?
Right, exactly. Because I knew the boat would float. I knew I'd be fine. I knew I'd be tied up. I knew it would be junk, but I figured it would be okay. I honestly did. And then I was floating out there, and I went, I was wrong. And then when they were towing me back, I was like, well, they'll meet me, right? That's the best thing to do. Meet me. Nope. They insulted me. And I thought, I was stupid enough to get on your boat, but you just pissed me off. And you shouldn't do that.
Yeah.
So anything else you learned from the experience?
She won't go boating with me now in the Mississippi, and the Coast Guard watches that. I mean, really, come on.
Did it bring you closer together? Or is she saying, oh my God, this man has just put my life in jeopardy?
No, I'm okay. I think kind of like what you say from the spiritual angle, there were other things at play.
Right.
And I think we have a duty now to put some safety measures in place on that lake. And also this resort needs to be dealt with. If they don't want to play along, well, then they can stop doing business there. So,
the one thing that we did here when we talked to the officer on the phone was, and we hadn't done any research, mind you, I was driving back in the car, and I was PO'd. And I said, hey, I want to know what the review process, I want to know who runs the lake. And he goes, well, it's conditional use federal under the U.S. Forest Service. And I went, oh, really? And he goes, yeah. And I go, well, I can't believe that you don't have a water officer on the lake after 5 p.m. And he goes, yes, I know. I can't believe it either. And I said, well, we have to correct that. And he goes, yes, I know. Absolutely. We stand behind you 100%.
so the sheriff's already on board. I guess he's been fighting to try and get a boat out there after hours. So this might be the final little tipping point that
something you said it rang interesting to me, where you guys said that they were so ready to throw money at you. I'm asking. The first thought in my mind is, okay, how many people have had problems with these people? If they're so ready to throw money at you to get rid of you,
so that was fine.
They're used to this happening. They're used to doing this.
It's like business as usual for them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when we were driving back and I was thinking about how I would tackle this, I knew from experience from working with people that I know. Report, and I would after I did the incident report, I would decide who would be affected. And just like you just figured out, Walt, I went, I should talk to the Shasta County District Attorney in the federal court, because if they'd done a business complaint, how would they find where the fraudulent activity was if they were just looking for people who have been hurt or something like that? But yeah, how many people get their money back every day across the lake? The lake, not just them, just the lake.
And I'm sure people don't want to hassle with lawyers and stuff like that. And don't worry about it. They gave us our money back, and it ends like that. But it shouldn't end like that.
It shouldn't.
Right.
We think it could be 20 or 30 times a week on the lake.
Well, because we
How
saw
do they all stay in business if they're paying people to keep their mouth shut?
It's a money game, and it's a booze game, because they know everybody's out there getting drunk, and they know that the boats have a limit of 10 people. If you have 12 on them, we take a picture of you. They send a boat around every day to take pictures of the boats they think that are overladen, so they can charge them the $2,500 deposit.
Yeah.
It's such a scam. It's incredible. But here's what I can tell you about people that scam people. If it's industry wide and we only mention one marina that happened to us, the other marinas, like vultures, will jump to our side to eliminate their buddy, the competitor, and they will do whatever we ask. If we say we want maintenance logs, you know what they'll say? We'll be more than happy to work with you. We want to be the friendly people. That's what they all say. They won't do it, but that's what they'll all say, because they know they can eliminate their buddy, and it's worth $8 million split 10 ways.
Wow. Life in the water is Deadly.
It's vicious. It's incredibly vicious.
Are there lots of sharks in that lake? Because it sounds like it.
Yeah.
Sharks.
They all live on the shoreline.
Land sharks.
Land sharks.
But
Okay, listen, we're at the halfway mark here, so let's just take a break somewhere over the rainbow. Welcome back to the Say What Show. It's September 30th, 2023. My name is Nancy Hopkins. With me is Dolly Howard, Walt Silva, Mona Radler, and Yasmin and Bob West. Did you guys basically cover the story? Is there anything else you wanted to add to that? Or do you have another story? Or
I think that's pretty much it. Hey, Bob, do you have anything you want to add to the story?
I'm sorry.
He was in the kitchen.
I was hungry. Can someone repeat the question, please?
Do you have anything you want to add to the story?
No, and I appreciate being able to tell you all about it and just and sometimes say the things that sometimes, and I even wrote this down when I was writing people, even when you're wrong, you still gotta get involved. And it could be that I did something wrong. Obviously, Walt, like you said, getting on the boat was wrong. but I think that, you know, no matter how it progresses, you just want to leave things a little bit better than you found them.
Yeah, and hopefully stop this from happening to someone else that might not be able to deal with it like we did.
Right.
yeah, it's important for people to take action when they see something wrong, period. You know,
Yeah.
and I appreciate you guys. I actually am very proud of you. And thank you for doing what you're doing. You know, it's pretty awesome.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
did you contact the Better Business Bureau, or does California not have one of those since you got such a a-hole governor?
Well,
That was interesting.
I did, even though I knew it would be pointless and fruitless, but I did. So,
Good.
I thought about contacting Better Business Bureau. It's voluntary. First of all, it's voluntary reporting. They charge you money. It's like a Yelp.
Oh, they do?
Oh yeah, it's like a Yelp. So you can do their regular base program for nothing. Get on their mailing list. They sell that. That's how they make their money. But pretty much Better Business Bureau, California is divided into a bunch of groups, yada, yada, yada. Anyway, I called them. They were like, nope, not a member. Don't worry about it. I was like, nope, don't need you. My first thought and only thought once it hit the idea that it was under a conditional use permit was to ask our federal government through what they call Freedom of Information, ask requests through the U.S. Forest Service about the number of incidents both day and night, number of officers, reason for the boat, blah, 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 number of houseboats, blah, blah, blah. How do you get a conditional use permit? How do you maintain it? What is your structural responsibility? What are the structures and responsibility for federal drinking water? Blah, blah, blah. And I figure if I do enough of that shit, the U.S. Forest Service will adopt the three things I want them to do, which are one sentence each.
Well, and just to have a crow's nest around the dam part that could keep an eye out on things too, and a boat available for emergencies would be great.
Well, that was how I saw it. Just leave the keys out and make one of the officers available, you know? I mean, how many times a year is it going to happen? Well, we found out. So how many hours have you spent looking at disasters now?
Yeah, there's about at least one death a year.
There's one death a year out there. And according to the officer, the daytime boat in the summertime for the response unit is busy the entire time.
So they do have a daytime response capability that's busy all the time, which means this is continually happening. And
Right.
yet they don't have one out at night?
That is correct, because the industry has been static and simplified for so long that most people by 5 o'clock in the afternoon are so smashed they don't drive anymore. They beach up and they party up and they barbecue up and they glamp up, and the fishermen which are your hardcore boaters out on that lake who would prefer the houseboats be gone completely, are all running in to get their boat on the trailer so they can go home and fry their fish at sunset in their backyards because it gets cold out there. So the lake is virtually dark, which is fine. I expected that. I wanted that. What I did not expect was underwater obstacles and protrusions unlit. No floating barrier between the suction devices. No potential rescue in a bad situation at night.
Yeah, so I looked a little at the construction of the dam and kind of how they built it. And they had this big steel tower that they used pulley systems to, kind of lift the concrete as they were pouring it. And they never dismantled that. So you have this big, it's kind of like, it looks like a electrical tower just, at the anchored in at the bottom of the dam. And all they did was take the top housing off. So you have this metal structure that you can run into. That's number one. And then there's no safety net. Most dams have a safety net.
It's steel wire on flotations, and you run into it, you can still go over it. I mean, but you run into it, you'd stop long enough to maybe tie off to it.
Yeah, so they don't have that. And then
No light.
So no lights. And then if you get closer to the dam, of course, there's, suction devices for the water to come through. So it's being in a giant toilet.
Right.
Well, that would scare the crap out of me. What if somebody fell overboard?
Yeah.
Well, right. I mean, I've been out in San Francisco Bay in 75 nautical mile an hour winds, and I wasn't scared. Okay, maybe I was a little scared, but I was scared about floating out onto a lake.
I'm just more grateful the longer you talk about you even being here to have this show. I just saw you both sucked under the dam.
Right.
So did we. We're like, oh no.
Yeah, I was probably reading Bob's mind. Oh my God. Or maybe yours. You seem to be more fascinated with the suction.
It sounds almost like a pair of pioneers having an adventure in the 1800s.
Right.
Yeah. And last year we saw a news story. Last year somebody actually did drown, and drowning victims usually float, is what Bob says. But he got pinned down on something. So, yeah, not a good situation.
Well, let's hope that you can rectify it. I mean, seriously.
Please call it